a stay-at-home dad, watching Disney movies he never had. His daughter digs through all the VHS, crushing the classics in a princess dress. Informed like Scuttle, Kurt's got your ticket, making it real like Jiminy Cricket. Most are off the Captain Hook, but if the Tweedledum, he'll be taking more shots than Bambi's mom. Leaves him raised like Simba, or cracked like the beach dishes. He'll show you a whole new world, you won't need 3 wishes. Stay at home, Disney Dad.
RKO Pictures and Disney present Mighty Joe Young. Yes, we start with a goofy monkey rolling down the hill as goofy monkeys do. Some blonde takes pictures of him as blondes do, and she's with her blonde little daughter. Her blonde little daughter looks like Greta Thunberg, like little blonde daughters do. I'll stop that now. Daughter gets scolded because she's interacting with the monkey. She's not supposed to do that. Suddenly we were in full horror movie mode as people with dogs charge through the forest with like monkey jingle janglers. The mom and daughter are talking about Joe at night. They're arguing about his age because he's already a big boy, so there's no way he can be that young and yet that big. Yeah, the jungle jangler poachers are on their way. This makeshift camp of guerrilla do-gooders are in big trouble. The bad guys with their guns and dogs and cigarettes and janglers are coming to poach them some guerrillas. They shoot Joe's mom, and they try to bag Joe, but Joe bites the fingers off the boss poacher. Then another poacher hits Joe in the head with his gun, and everyone scatters. Joe runs to Jill, and Jill is like, "How dare you!" The mom actually got shot. The mom is dead. I should not have been surprised that a parent died in this Disney movie, but here we are. At the funeral, Jill runs into the bushes and hugs Joe. 12 years later, some dude is riding a Jeep. He looks like MacGyver, and he gives off MacGyver vibes. He meets up with his group of shady dudes. He asks if they're poachers, because he just wants experienced trackers, not evil poachers. They ask what they are hunting. He goes, "We're not hunting anything," and he shows them tranquilizers. He wants to take them to the top of the mountain, and their boss is like, "That is not a good idea. Legend has it there's a monster up there, and no one who ever goes up there comes back alive." But that's what they're doing. They're actively tracking this monster, this legend. So they capture a jaguar, and MacGyver takes a blood sample from the jaguar, and then they hear a roar. Trees move. The jaguar looks terrified. This is all good stuff. There's a pause. Then Mighty Joe Young jumps out from the trees, and he's all grown up, and he's gigantic. Great King Kong special effects here as Joe pulls open the cage and lets the jaguar go and then retreats back into the trees. The men want to run away, but MacGyver offers to triple their pay if they stay and try to capture this thing. So they're all in. Now they're chasing Joe in their Jeeps. One guy fires a trank into Joe's shoulder. Joe smashes his Jeep. Joe uses their own chain to try to decapitate them, and this is also good stuff because their kappas were almost detated. The more interaction, though, they have with this monkey, the less impressive the King Kong effects seem to be honest, though. MacGyver tells the main guy to take his men back down the mountain and get him bandaged up, and he goes like, "You're not coming with us?" "Nope." "Crazy American!" MacGyver goes to take it alone, tracking the big monkey. Joe gets the jump on him, and he's shaking him upside down like a baby, and then grown-up Jill comes out of nowhere and makes the save, but the guy passes out. He wakes up in the infirmary, and he's like, "There was a giant gorilla and a beautiful girl." And the doctor's like, "You'll be leaving soon." So I assume this place was like supposed to be all hush-hush and private. So he walks out the front door, and Jill is just kind of standing there across the street. And Jill does what every woman does when they want to be invisible. She puts a giant basket of fruit on her head and walks off down the middle of the road. MacGyver just stalks this poor woman now. She goes to a waterfall and whistles for Joe. And she's like, "Joe, you aren't supposed to let people see you. That guy saw you yesterday." Joe is like a giant dog. Jill plays hide and seek with Joe, and that's kind of funny because he's so big. It's cute. It's fun stuff, right? MacGyver takes a picture of Joe, and Joe sees like the flash or whatever, so he gets mad. He rips the tree out of its roots that Joe is hiding behind, and Joe's gonna get his face, Joe is gonna smash this guy's face again, but Jill calls him off a second time. She looks at MacGyver's camera and smashes it in front of him. He says he knows who she is, who her mom was. He says, "How did you keep this giant thing a secret for so long?" She says, "By keeping people like you away from him." He says it's only a matter of time now because his gang of men also saw Joe. He wants to take Joe back and put him in a sanctuary where he'll be safe. Now, actually makes sense, even though this is his fault. We see that bad guy. Someone from a zoo is talking to him, and they don't have room for a panda anymore, so they're going to give it to this guy. He's going to harvest his organs. Then the leader of MacGyver's men, Like the hired hands calls this bad guy, and he's like, there's a giant monkey on the hill, and the bad guy thinks this guy's drunk, so he just hangs up on him. Jill busts some poachers trying to poach, kicks him off the hill. Now MacGyver is helping Jill. They know a gang of poachers are going to try to get Joe now that he's been spotted, so MacGyver and Jill team up. They flirt in a way only people in action movies flirt. We get a moment where he wants to shake her hand, but she goes, that's not how we make a pact up here. Up here, we get a voluntary spider bite that gives us a fever, and then we hallucinate, and then when we babble, you know we're telling the truth. That's awesome. She says that's also not true, but that was awesome. Good idea. Jill runs to Joe and they're trying to get him to safety. Jill and Joe have a moment where like romantic music swells. Now we're on the highway. Joe is in a giant semi-trailer. They're going to LA. I guess they're going to take Joe to that gorilla sanctuary after all. Great drone shots of the highway from above. Again, this is someone with a video camera and a helicopter leaning out. They arrive at the sanctuary. We meet Dr. Rubin, the male bumbler, and Dr. Banks, the smart lady. Great camera perspective as Joe exits the trailer and looks down and everyone's looking up at him on all the major characters. Jill's in charge of Joe, but bumbler Dr. Rubin is in charge of the whole facility. Joe is miserable in the sanctuary. The next day, the alarm goes off and Joe is going crazy. At the hotel, Jill is watching an infomercial for spray on hair. It's all a misunderstanding, though. Joe is actually acting nuts because he just wants to play hide and seek. Turns out Joe likes it here. The audio for this VHS tape is all over the place. Like, it's really bad. Those alarms going off are shaking our house. Now the dialogue is super quiet. Come on, VHS. The bad guy is watching the news story about Joe, and his henchman wasn't drunk. This thing is real. He wants his monkey. Oh, this is one of the bad guy for the original poachers that killed Joe's mom and Jill's mom 12 years ago. He looks down at his missing finger hand that Joe bit his fingers off, and he's like, I gotta go to America. I have to pay them a visit. One of the original poachers goes to see Joe and jangles his noisemaker. It's the same kind they used 12 years ago, and Joe remembers it, and he starts having a fit. MacGyver and Jill walk along the beach flirting. They're about to kiss, but her pager goes off, sign of the times. Joe is in trouble. She gets there, and Joe is throwing a major tantrum after seeing that guy with the jingle janglers. Jill doesn't know what happened. Suddenly, she is in his arms and singing to him, and this scene weirdly has a bunch of weight to it. Look at you, mighty Joe Young, bringing on the emotion. Jill begs the Dr. Bumbler to delay the celebration of Joe's arrival to the sanctuary, and he tells her to worry less about Joe and more about what she's going to wear tonight. She storms out and runs right into the main bad guy poacher missing fingers. He goes, you look just like your mother. He tells her he was a dear friend of her mother's. He's telling her that he wants to take Joe to Iraq in his massive habitat where he'll be happier. She likes what she hears. He says he'll be attending the event tonight and maybe they can talk after the event. We got a Sixpence None the Richer, kiss me teen movie moment when Jill makes her entrance in her skin-tight white dress. All eyes turn. She asks why everyone is staring at her. The guy says, they're not staring at her. They're staring at the banana tower. And I feel like Jill has her pick of banana towers in that room right now. The bad guy goes outside to see Joe and plays with his jingle janglers. The play is to get Joe so riled up and scare everyone as to be seen as dangerous, so they have no choice but to give him up so he can run interference and agree to take him to Iraq. That's pretty solid. They introduce mighty Joe Young, and he busts in, pissed off, looking for that guy with the missing finger and the jingle janglers. The plan worked good. They tranquilize Joe, and he goes to sleep. The news story starts with, the gorilla literally crashed the party. Joe has been contained to a steel bunker now. This is like King Kong meets Dumbo in a weirdly amount of cleavage in a Disney movie. MacGyver says he's sorry to Joe, reaches through the bars and holds his hand. Dr. Bumbler tells Jill Joe has to stay in the bunker until they figure out what the city will do with him. Jill says he's not going to eat, he's depressed, and he's going to die in here. He says you'll have to find him a giant backyard for him to play in. And hey, wait a minute, that Iraq guy had just the thing. Now there's a plan afoot. They show up late at night with lab coats on, so security lets them in. It's just that easy. And they try to spring Joe from the bunker, but then the security guard pulls a gun at him, and Jill shoots the guard with a tranquilizer gun. They back up the semi, and they load up Joe. As the movie continues, the special effects just become less and less impressive, like they're running out of money or something. There's one shot where Joe is coming out of the hospital, and you can tell it's just a regular-sized gorilla coming out of like a kid's playhouse made to look like a hospital, with the characters like green screened in front of all this. It's a mess. Anyway, MacGyver lined all this up, and Jill is thankful and giving him bedroom eyes because he really came through for her. This is all his fault. This is all because of him. what a swerve! The bad guy is the guy driving the semi, the guy without fingers. Well, I didn't actually not see that coming. Suddenly they find the jingle janglers and MacGyver realizes those guys driving the semi are the bad guys. Not sure how he connected those dots, but he goes speeding off behind the semi in his car. Inside the semi, the bad guys are kind of giving low-key hints until Jill, who is sitting between the two bad guys in the cab, figures out who they are. Jill starts throwing elbows and escapes the semi, but they're still driving away with Joe. MacGyver picks up Jill, and the race continues. Fun little car chase for a Disney movie, to be honest. It's good. Now Joe throws himself against the side of the semi and tips it. Great visuals as he busts through the side of the semi like the steel to escape, and the city people run in fear as this monster just like rips through the steel. And my daughter says, this would be the craziest day of my life if I saw this. Great scene. Like, this really is turned up. Expensive scene. We see shots of Hollywood. Joe smashes cars, and it's really rewarding here. If I was a kid, I would have watched this scene over and over until the VHS was damaged. I feel like there's a lot of famous actor cameos in the scene as we go full on King Kong. He climbs the famous Chinese theater, also entrance to Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. Joe is at the Hollywood sign now. The bad guy's just walking down the street loading his gun, like loading his rifle. They steal a car, and and the race to Joe is on. Joe is walking towards a giant spotlight by some outdoor theme park. I should know where this is. And Jill feels like it's because he thinks the spotlight is her flashlight, because they used to play flashlight games. The theme park is something Ocean Park. Joe walks by one of those shooting range games, and he doesn't like that. He doesn't like guns. That's fun. The bad guy tries to shoot Jill, but his henchman has this moment of morality and knocks the gun, so the boss misses killing Jill. Then the bad guy knocks him out with his rifle. Joe is causing fires and chaos at the park. Again, amazing sets, great pacing. The second half of this movie has been so solid. Just hundreds of extras running terrified through this exploding on-fire amusement park. This was not a cheap scene to shoot. This is way before CGI, right? Jill sees Joe and puts his gun to her face and says, "Say hi to your mother in hell." Wow, sorry, kid. Joe rips him up by his arm, screams in his face, and throws him into the electrical wires as he fries and sizzles alive. My daughter stares forward unblinking. This never happened in Bluey. The SWAT team arrive. They're going to shoot Joe, but Joe sees one kid still trapped on the Ferris wheel, and he climbs to help him. Joe climbing the Ferris wheel is an amazing visual. Holy I'm so into this, man. This scene was intense. The Ferris wheel breaks and tips, and Joe flat back bumps, landing on the ground on his back, saving the kid. Joe ain't moving. Is Joe actually dead? I assume this is like just a third scene death scare, but I don't know if this movie. It's been darker than usual. Joe may be dead here. No, he comes back to life. He's not dead, and I don't know. I actually thought there was a good chance he could be dead. This movie kicks ass. They had me. MacGyver says he has to get Joe somewhere safe. The kid he saved says, I have some money. Now everyone is giving the money. Joe is crowdfunding, and now we go to the end of the movie. With all the money they got, they opened the Joe Young Wildlife Park, a new sanctuary where he can live and be free. So they crowdfunded millions of dollars that night at the fair. I don't. Wow, what a ride. When it was slow, this movie was pretty boring. But when it picked up, holy cow, it was fantastic. Total A for effort from Mighty Joe Young. Some of the effects look great and others look terrible. Totally uneven movie, but it was more good than bad, even if it was basically King Kong. You know, it's hard to compare every giant monkey movie and not have it be King Kong, right?
That's what I think about.
What do you think?
What we have is a concern about Curtis Anderson. His interviewing style is not the best. His personal appearance is not the best. I was wondering if the man has some kind of a hold over the channel that he's allowed to be employed for so long with the standards of journalism and personal appearance that